Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and it's great that we have Robert here, who's the chief designer for Beats, has the ammunition design firm that you've created, been involved in so many different interesting products that, from ebooks to cameras, just so many fascinating things that many people throughout the world have used. So it's definitely an honor to have you here, and I'm excited to speak with you.
Great. But thanks, Ben. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So I'd love to just start out, Robert, with a bit of like your past earlier on. So when you were young, were you always into design? Was that just a passion of yours? Did you like drawing? Like, how did this design passion originate?
Well, when you get to go look back through the lens of the past, you can see it, right? I was always into art, into drawing. I did painting. So it kind of goes back to my family. My father was a very accomplished mechanical engineer. Right? He worked at IBM, invented most of the mechanical technology and the original disk drives. And and he was a tinkerer and an inventor, and there was always something going on, right? Building a boat, whatever in the garage. Then my mom was originally a fashion model, then turned homemaker, turned craftsperson, um, entrepreneur. She started her own children's clothing company, and so that's the environment I lived in, right? And our house was full of mid-century modern teak furniture. Um, I just thought we were weird, right? We were different than all my friends. um, so those were my influences. And when I look back on it, everything in our house was a project, right? It's just that's kind of the way we went at things. I used to joke the Christmas tree was like a performance art every year. So that's where my roots were. And then how I got into design, I didn't even know about design as a profession. Right? I was in high school. I finished. You go see the career counselor, and he looks at your transcripts and says, "Oh, you're good in math and science, so you're an engineer." Right? He didn't even look at my grades in art class or shop class or anything like that, right? Um, I went in engineering school because my dad did. I was there for a year, didn't like it, and did all right grade wise, didn't like it. Decided I'd go over to my mom's side and took a stroll over to the art building and walked in, and right in front of me was this display case full of industrial design stuff, renderings and models and sketches, and I knew that was it. That was what I wanted to do. Because I would spend, like my dad, hours in the garage building a bike, whatever. I knew how to weld, things like so. Uh, but I often wonder, it's like you see the hand of destiny, because I could have easily walked in another door, and been
Right.
a starving sculptor or something, right? So it, uh, it was just and then after that, I just like ran with it. I think. After I switched to design, I never received a grade lower than a B, and most were A's. It's just was my thing.
hmm So what did you specifically see, like in that, like when you said you saw certain like these industrial designs, like what specifically did you see that really triggered it? Was it just the beauty overall of what you were looking at?
It was making stuff, right? And
Hmm.
that's what I still like to do. It's about
Right.
making things. And now I'm making things at scale. But even then, what I saw were sketches, and I love to draw. And there's amazing sketches, marker sketches of products and cars and stuff, and these cool models that were made in the shop. And so I was more looking at the craft of it all, and thinking, yeah, this looks like a lot of fun. Right?
Hmm.
That's what I should do.
And then, so from there, basically, you went and transitioned. You got your first, essentially your first job. Seems like you created like your own design thing in the beginning, pretty much, right? Like, why did you decide to go that route?
Well, yeah, I had a couple jobs in school that were just whatever internships, and then I got an internship with this design company which my roommate worked at, and you know and kind of worked my I started out in the model shop and made my way
Right.
out of the shop as soon as they figured out I could design, and I was, paid next to nothing. And so that was a great experience because my roommate Gerard Frobisher and there was another guy named Jeff Smith. We worked really closely together and just made a really
Mhm.
good team and really enjoyed it. So we started, meeting after hours at the pizza parlor across the highway. What are we going to do? And decided we want to start our own company. We didn't know how, and eventually culled together whatever money we could, which wasn't much. Didn't pay
Right.
ourselves and started an office in a really junky space. But we were all good, and we had enough, of a network to sort of get some work going, and that became Lunar Design, and that was our first firm, and it was fantastic. I mean, I didn't care whether I was getting paid, not paid anything. We
Right.
were, just guys, in our 20s, just doing our thing, getting paid, by people to do it, making things. It was fantastic, and so that was. I often say I think it's kind of ruled my career is knowing enough to be dangerous, and don't ask for um, um, don't ask permission, ask for forgiveness. Right? Those are kind of the things that rule my day. I'm sort of if I do an autobiography, I'll call it the oblivious optimist. Um, because I've always been that way for almost everything I do. I get in over my head and figure it out.
Right. So you founded this group with a bunch of a couple of your friends, right? These are great designers, and you're essentially creating products together. So did you develop like a philosophy that you took on later on with your development with Beats and with other products as well as at Ammunition? Has there been like a constant philosophy that you kind of developed from the ground there, or has it just been the same similar people and you guys create similar, have similar designs and products from
Yeah,
that?
no, there was. And that was one reason Jeff Gerard and I got together, and that we all had a love for European modernist design, right? And my influences were when I was in school were, Mario Bellini, Dieter Rams, Tori Satsas, Kenneth Grange. I mean, all very classic, European designers, and the work that I studied, and sort of we really, carried that sensibility with us and really embraced it. And it was interesting because the first firm we worked at, the management didn't really share that, right? That wasn't
Hmm.
who they were. And so that was one of the reasons we left, because we were really getting tired of getting creative direction that just philosophically did not run consistent with the way we thought. And that I mean, that sort of foundation is continuing. I mean, it's just really sort
Right.
of about building things that last, and not just functionally, but visually, sort of perceptually, sort of really trying to build things with as much of a timeless quality, following a sort of very classic rule set. It's always been what we've done.
Yeah. So how did the role with Beats originate? Like how did that happen that you got involved and they just reach out
That's
to you? Or
sort of. There was a third party who originally introduced me, who had sort of gotten wind that Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre were interested in creating audio products. So I got introduced, went to the first meeting, which was just insane, right? It was just like,
right.
here I am, Silicon Valley design geek, hanging out with Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine, uh, and just the whole meeting was nuts. And so we went on this crash program to design this headphone. Essentially, they had Jimmy was brilliant. Both Jimmy very brilliant, obviously, but Jimmy had really an amazing business sense and saw this that for his audience, the audience that he spoke to with the music and the artists that they were creating, there was no high performance audio brand. It just didn't exist. It's like Bose is your dad's headphone,
Nothing for
whatever.
hip hop for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, nothing for hip hop. So that's what we're gonna do is build a headphone that was tuned specifically for rock and hip hop, and address that audience. And so what was really interesting to me is that pretty quickly I gelled with Jimmy and Dre, which was always kind of surprising to me, and there was a lot of respect there, of course, both from me to them, but them to me. And eventually figured out, I read this Rolling Stone interview with Jimmy where he was talking about how he worked with his musical artists, and how he would push them and just, drive them and be really mean to them. And I realized that's exactly how he was treating me. And so I get calls on Saturday morning, like, what the fuck is going on, Robert? But we sort of related to each other on the level of artists, and they saw me as an artist, so that connection became very strong pretty quickly.
Was there specific designs that you previously did that he's like, okay, Robert, I really like this and I want you to channel this in the product? Do you think that your previous work, there were some things that stood out to him that he's like, hey, this is why I want Robert on the project and to design beats?
You know, I I don't know. We never really talked about it. I think, I just kind of showed up with this other guy and we connected and they looked into my background being at Apple. And of course, Jimmy had a relationship with Steve Jobs. And so I think that all worked for them. I think, the first part of the project, was to develop the original studio. And like I said, we went away for 2 weeks and came back with about, 15 ideas, laid them out on the table. And normally when you go through those kind of sketch reviews with a client, there'll be a lot of hemming and hawing and try and narrow it down to like four and,
Right.
and they just like looked at them and walked over to one and said, that one,
Huh.
I want to do that one, which was like so refreshing. And that was the design for the original studio, which was just a sketch at that point. But the concept we had was that, when I looked out at headphones that existed, they were really, justifiably complicated, right? There's so many things that a headphone has to do. Of course, acoustics, fit, ergonomics, comfort, reliability, all these things tend to drive how they look. And that's why most headphones are very, articulated and mechanical. And I was sketching and sketching on top of the head, right? In front of you. I did this single line that ran from ear to ear. And that's what I want to do. I want to clean all that stuff up and just create this very simple element. And it's something that actually looks good on the body, right? And so that was the impetus for the entire product line, was that one sketch. And they didn't see it. So
Did they tell you, Robert, that they wanted the headphones to have lifestyle appeal as well and to be like a fashion item almost, or was that just like something that kind of happened?
Both. I mean, they definitely saw it as, wearable art and as a fashion item. And, the whole marketing model, right from the get-go was, Jimmy was going to use all his relationships to embed the thing in popular culture, really. And
Right.
so it was very important that it was iconic, that you could see it and recognize it from, 30 feet away. And so what he started to do was almost every video that went out of Universal Music, the headphone was in it, sometimes just in the background, sometimes as a star, right? And just began to build this, cultural consciousness for the product, which it got, it kind of chugged along in the beginning and all of a sudden it caught fire and just went insane. So yeah, from the beginning, it was like, look, these things have to look amazing and they have to look amazing on people. And yeah, after they started to catch on, we see them used as props in runway shows. You see,
Right.
a beautiful person on the street, very proudly wearing them and walking along. It was really, really amazing how they took off that way.
How long did it
And
take to how long did it take to do the design overall? Like how was it like a 6 month process, a couple months? Like
no, well, most projects, the shortest time to get something from start out into the world is usually about a year. I mean, and that's pretty fast. There's so many
yeah.
things that have to be done, and especially when you get into mass production and at a high quantity of something, there's really an enormous amount of work to get that to happen. The first one took a lot longer, and it was largely because decision making. I mean, just Jimmy and Dre, they didn't really get it. Like, if they're working on a piece of music, they could go into the studio at the 11th hour and, turn some knobs and move some sliders and so they kept wanting to change things late in the game, which basically means, these giant pieces of steel that we've cut to create tools, become useless and you have to do it again, right? And so the first product took a lot longer than it should have. It was over a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. And finally got it out.
Well, what do you think the future of the brand is now for Beats? I mean, because they've been assimilated into Apple. Apple really, in some ways, they use the Beats acquisition to progress their own headphones and their own earphones. How does Beats continue to stand out now?
Well, full disclosure, I still work for Beats and Apple,
Hmm.
so like some caution around that stuff. But I think the brand, there is, when that first product came out, I'll never forget. Like a year later, I went to the Consumer Electronics Show, and probably 80% of the headphones had some DNA from our studio, right? It's just the
Oh, they all
whole,
copy you guys. They
yeah,
all did.
just the whole industry
Yeah.
just like movies. And so from a design point of view and from a lifestyle point of view, they still are leaders, right? And so
Mhm.
I think the brand continues to evolve and evolve with its audience and try to stay, keep that again that cultural relevance. I think it's always an interesting counterpoint to Apple because Apple, of course, is an extremely strong brand, driven a lot by technology. Beats tends to be more driven by, you know, energy and the
Right.
sort of music and the artistry of it all. So the roadmap is to continue to do and build on that, grow on it, grow it.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, it is very culture driven. Um, so you also like I think you were involved also early on with the development of the Nook when I think the Kindle was out for about 2 years or so, and then the Nook came out after. And that was the Barnes and Noble answer. But how did you kind of think through developing the Nook when the Kindle was already out and like coming up with its own competitive advantages and making it stand
Yeah.
out?
Well, I actually worked on the first Kindle as well. Uh,
Okay.
so I had experience, and that had been a little while, so we didn't have any issues with Amazon, and was approached by Barnes and Noble because they had somehow found out that I had experience with ebooks, and in particular e-ink display technology, which was a different beast entirely. Uh, so what we really did at that point was really leapfrog um, the Kindle from a UI point of view, and also move to a much more, again, simple, clean aesthetic than the
Mhm.
Kindle was utilizing, and really focused on the product experience. And that really became what Nook was about, was really sort of building this device that's beautiful to look at, feels great to hold, but also kind of recedes, right? I mean, that was one of the philosophies was, reading is reading, right? It shouldn't be
Simple.
a technology overlay, right? And so really focused a lot on that. And I mean, Barnes and Noble had a huge challenge competing with Amazon. Amazon had so much momentum, and
Right.
they managed to hold their own for a while. And we did some really great products with them. Going into color, uh, different sizes, different and but eventually it's just it's really tough to compete with Amazon on it. But it was a fantastic experience. Shortly after I started working with them, William Lynch joined as CEO. We had an amazing relationship, and he always wanted to push from a design point of view. Really saw it as a way to maintain an edge over Amazon.
Mhm. So being involved in like Kindle development early on, did you think the product had opportunity for so much success? Like what did you think was going to be the outcome of what you were building?
Yeah, we did, and I mean one of the in that first project, I think one of the important things that we came up with was really this sort of very simple structure for the device that essentially exists today. Is that you've got your bookshelf or library, you've got your store, your bookstore, and then you've got your reading, right? And really sort of kept it very simple. Really, only those three sort of modes you had to understand was how you bought your stuff, where you kept your stuff, and then reading it. And so we really built a user interface architecture based on that and maintain that simplicity. And that still exists today. It's become more cloudy, more feature driven, but it's still the basic way that it functions, and rightfully so.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes sense. It seems like a lot of this is simplicity. Like a lot of what you try to develop in products. It's like the product itself is the selling point. Not all these other bell and whistles, and minimize those extra things and just focus on what the product is.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, in the stuff that we do, it's really important to understand the soul of the product and what's important and have a means to. It's almost an editorial, right? Every good product has an editorial, and it speaks in a certain way, and there's certain things you say and certain things you don't say. That's the way you sort of build out something that's really great, and that's the
Yeah.
way we've always did technology products. Just because just because your product's connected, has a screen, doesn't mean you should be able to read your email on it. Right?
Right.
A lot of people think that way, right? It's like, oh, why don't we just shove more functionality in there peripherally, and it'll make it more appealing to people. The reality is, it just confuses people.
Yeah. So when you guys were thinking of, when you guys were trying to rethink the modern cash register in a sense, and you like use the iPad or use a screen, how did the whole register come about, like the sleekness of the design and the ability to just flip it over like that? Like how did all the thinking start for that, for your design there?
Yeah, that was an amazing time working with Square, working with Jack Dorsey. The there were a couple of things that were really important to us. So we worked on the reader as well, the one that plugged into your phone. Which
Yeah,
really, I don't think it gets enough credit for the transformational effect that product had. Prior to
it
that,
was incredible.
yeah, using a Visa card was a nightmare. Getting it, and all of a sudden, all you did was get on a website, get an envelope in the mail, plug it in, and pretty soon you were selling your sneakers on the sidewalk, right? It was just fantastic. And there was something about that we thought was really important, and that was this sort of exchange, right? When the guy would take the credit card, swipe it on his phone, and turn his phone around, and the person would sign it. And there was this kind of very classic retailer seller transactional nature that we thought was important. Uh, so when we started working on the stand, that was one thing we really wanted to maintain that. Also, it was really geared, as we did our research, really geared towards small business and small business retail. And as we, talked to shop owners, we really, you could feel the pride people had in their business, right? And so, we really, that combined with Jack Dorsey, who really wanted a very clean, simple, minimalist kind of feel to the products, sort of that all coalesced into the Square stand. So it has the lazy Susan, so you can do the flip around to do the signature and the transaction, and it's just it's probably one of the most elegant products we've ever done in terms of a visual architecture. And the backside is probably the most beautiful surface because that's the one that faces the consumer. So that was one of those things. Implementing it was really hard because the way we designed it made it difficult to produce. But we had the commitment of that organization to do that. So it again was one of the more amazing things we've worked on in the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, it really transformed the opportunity for small businesses to monetize in this digital age. Both those products did. I mean, specifically even the reader. Like I remember when that came out and with the headphone jack, and people didn't even think anything like that was possible. And then it just completely transformed the phone from a mobile application standpoint as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's fantastic. Such a brilliant idea.
Yeah, agreed. So I just probably the last question for today is, so when you were creating the lift, like they have that, that circular light in the front of it. How did you
Yeah,
rethink like modern traffic and how to like, and also like how to have this kind of play into the lift service? Like what was the thought process there?
yeah. So that was the second generation of the medallion, some people call it. The first one was actually the mustache. I don't know if you remember the pink glowing
I
mustache.
do. Yeah.
And that was really interesting because, you know, designing a product based on a corporate icon is always really tricky, right? And to get it just right. But there was something that pink fuzzy mustache that drivers used to tie onto the front of their car. There was something so endearing and quintessentially San Francisco about it.
Yeah.
We really wanted to carry that into a product that was more visible, easy. You didn't have to take it off, didn't get dirty. And it had a little bit of intelligence to it. So that was the first one. And then when we got to the next version, they really wanted to increase the interactivity of the device so that it could change colors relative to you, the guy in the street. So you had a color, so you could see the orange one was yours.
Hmm.
It had a display on the back that would welcome you in the vehicle. We just wanted to make it a little more part of the ride experience. And that one, I don't know if you remember what it looks like. Getting both of them, but the amp was the second one called took so much time to get the light effects right. Right? It's something when people see a product that's glowing and doing some cool stuff, they go, "Oh, that's really amazing. I love that." It takes months, if not years, to figure all that out and how to do it consistently and do it well. So that was a crazy amount of work to get that to work well. But it is really cool, and you see them in the vehicles. It's really beautiful. It just really pops out on the windshield.
Agreed. But what do you think's next for you? Like you've done a bunch of different consumer product designs. Like where do you want the next phases of your career to go, Robert?
That's a good question. I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, I'm old enough where people ask me, "Are you going to retire?" And I kind of say, "What is that?" I don't
Right.
understand what that means because I have no interest in that. I'm a big believer. I don't know if you're the Japanese principle of ikigai, which is just having purpose, right? And my purpose is to make stuff. And so, but I think we're at a point with ammunition. We're trying to figure out where to go next because I can say, without arrogance, we're really good at what we do. We get amazing projects, most of them in technology. Uh, but we're trying to figure out, well, where do we take this team of talent we've created and what to do next? And we're starting to explore some things. Um, One thing we've been doing over the last 10 years is working in a way where we actually invest in many of the startups we work with. And, and that's been really rewarding in that we become part of the proposition, which actually means we can do better work. People listen to you, uh, respect what you're doing. And then we also take the business proposition even more seriously because it's our money. Um, so I think we're, to continue to build off that of you really having a stake in the things that we do and really starting to drive things in that sense. We tried to start a couple of brands on our own and it really pointed out to what we're good at and what we're not good at. We're not good
Yeah.
at the operational aspects of bringing something up at scale. It's just not in our DNA. We're good at creating and defining and refining, but that's so it's in flux, but going to continue to do good stuff. We have a great studio and great team, and there's a lot we can do with it.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it will definitely be exciting to see what you do next. I appreciate you taking the time, Robert, to join us here and to just share some of the interesting things throughout your career and what you've done, and definitely wish you much success on whatever you do next.
Well, thank you, Ben. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome.